Today I wanted to cover the history of the medical world and how we got to where we are today. So, when you're looking at the difference between alternative and what we call allopathic medicine, so we kind of break those into our modern society, it's more of an osteopath versus allopath. And a lot of that goes all the way back to the time of the Crusades. So we're going to transport back there for a minute and we're going to talk about what was really happening when all of these things kind of broke apart and how we got to where we are today. So, back when the Crusades were happening and Christianity was being taken forcefully across the earth, there were a lot of campaigns and divisions that were put up at that time. And so there became this distinction that only priests had the power to heal through God, and anybody else doing any kind of spiritual healing at that time. And back then, it was really just spiritual and physical. There wasn't anything geared specifically toward emotions and things like that. They had humors, they had, other ways of kind of talking about and looking at these things. But for the most part, you just start to see this divide between, okay, nobody can heal the spirit except for a priest. And so anybody who was doing any kind of holistic medicine, looking at anything but just the body alone, became a heretic. And they would be tortured or killed or, you know, turned in. And so people stopped doing that. But scientists found out that if they studied just the body, that the priests would leave them alone and they wouldn't. I mean, there were still issues, but for the most part, if you were like, okay, we aren't healing your body, your, feelings, anything like that, or we're not healing your spirit, we're healing your body. And so I'm just going to focus on that. And then that's kind of where you start to see this division come into Western medicine. So they started to really degrade the structure of like medicine, women or men, herbalism, in terms of like, especially if a woman was doing any kind of herbs, if there was any kind of soothsaying, if there was any kind of, looking at that whole body and things going on in the life of the person, that all became heresy and it was really strongly um, attacked and kind of dissolved in the Western society. But in places where you don't see the Crusades reach, then a lot of their holistic approach, like in the Eastern world, it stayed the same. They always looked at the body as emotional, spiritual, mental, physical. They looked at all aspects of a being and they treated all of those things. And so, fast forwarding for a little while, you come into the era where doctors are starting to be localized in small towns and villages, and there's more of like a structured schooling for them and things like that. And small town doctors started to notice that like they knew their patients intimately. They lived in a small town and they knew everything about these people's lives. And when they were coming in with certain ailments, they were having similar problems in their lives. And so they started to think about this like, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's something to this. And so they started to keep track and record, what physical problems were matching up with people's emotional and mental and situational problems in their lives. And that's where the birth of osteopathy was born. And so osteopaths were medically allopathically trained, but they were starting to emerge into this idea of kind of the more holistic approach, looking at more than just isolating the physical symptoms and isolating a physical treatment. And so that's kind of where we are today, is that um, there's been more and more evidence of the connections, and now we can explain a lot of things, scientifically that we couldn't before. Like when you press acupressure and reflexology points in your foot or in your hand, you can actually see on a medical scan and diagnostic that blood flow increases to that area of the body. And now we can kind of see in genetic mapping that having a really strong emotional experience or trauma actually alters the DNA, and it kind of records and encodes that trauma. And so we're starting to scientifically come around to seeing that our emotions and our mindset physically creates responses in our body and our symptoms. And so it comes, into this beautiful conjunction in this time and place. And now we have this information age where we can draw from ancient knowledge in the Eastern world, where a lot of that wasn't changed. It was it just was passed down. Like these ancient truths were passed down and ancient remedies were passed down. And so we have that convergence and that knowledge coming in with, studying intricately the physical things and isolating those physical things happening in the body. And so you can start to see more of the marriage of these things happening and coming together. And we can bring all of this knowledge together and say, okay, here are the benefits of both. And looking at, all right, what's truly the best path for each individual person in their healing then. So what I like to do is kind of step back from having any kind of bias over one path or another, because all healing comes from the same source. All healing comes from just that innate love that's deep inside of us. Like when we're feeling loved and when we feel love, those feelings create a healing pathway in our body. Our body is naturally going to create the cells and send the cells and the nutrients and things like that in our body to the place that needs healing. Our bodies naturally want to be healthy, naturally want to be strong, and they're constantly working to be in that state of things. And so when we have a tight muscle and it's pulling our bones slightly out of alignment, you get inflammation in that area because your body wants to fix it. It wants to go send that blood and oxygen and the nutrients that tissue needs to relax, to calm down, to heal, to let go. And so it'll create inflammation in that area to draw more blood and oxygen to that area. It's kind of, inflammation is your body's way of saying, here, over here needs some help. And so looking at kind of that history and understanding how we got to where we are today, we can see, some of the shortcomings of coming into an isolated perspective on healing, but also some of the benefits of really narrowing that vision down and getting really, really specific. So we can start to appreciate each path for what it is, but also recognize that we are all different. And so some of us, surgery is a great path. It's going to clear that problem for us really quickly and easily, and we can have a great recovery in that. And for other people, surgery is way too disruptive and invasive for something that they could have easily worked around and through in a different way. And so that's kind of my passion. That's kind of my goal with videos like this, is to just educate and just kind of put this idea out there that one shoe doesn't fit all, and we can appreciate each modality for what it is. And I also have lots of different ways to help people connect to and understand what their modality is going to be for them specifically in their journey. And sometimes that can change at different stages of the journey, but especially when we've run into the situation where tests aren't answering our questions and we're not getting any direction from one type of medicine or the other, then it's really important to kind of step back and say, okay, what is the best path? And right now in the world, we're just barely emerging into where we can start to explore multiple path options. So I hope you found this video to be insightful and helpful on some level today. Comment below with any questions that you have. And if you'd like to know more about different modalities, I can go into those details. You can like and subscribe the video, and I'll know what to do for you.